Hello everyone and welcome to an incredible game that was played in Sunway Sitges tournament of 2025. It comes as a suggestion from none other than the legend himself, David Lada. You know that when he suggests a game that is going to be a brilliant one, and it's a clash between a Romanian international master, he's 16 years old, Felix-Antonio, and a 52-year-old Spanish grandmaster, José Antonio. And the game is, I like to think of every game as a story because, if a game doesn't tell a story, then it's not really a game. And this game is the story about the rook on a1 and the journey it had. If we could, we should make a full-featured film about this rook, maybe put a camera on it and just experience everything this rook experienced. I usually don't say these things up front, but this game I feel it's really important that you pay attention to what this rook is doing. So let's check it out. Felix-Antonio with white opens with pawn to d4. We have pawn to d5, c4, pawn to e6, and knight to f3. We have knight to f6 and knight to c3. Okay, so some sort of an English, but we will transpose into the Semi-Tarrasch. We have pawn to c5, and you can counter it with something like e3 or bishop to g5. C captures on d5 is the most common reply, and here black has only 3 replies. One is c captures on d4, knight captures on d5, or e captures on d5, which is the most common. So captures, and now I think bishop g5 was always the most played. Now g3 has become the most played move. But okay, bishop to g5 and bishop to e6. Now, as the knight is being pressured, you do want to have additional defense on that d5 pawn. So if the knight is captured, the queen can also recapture. And here e3 is pretty much an automatic for everyone, but we have pawn to a3. And this move isn't really used at the top level. One player that uses it a lot is Parham Maksulu. He used it against Hikaru, he used it against Nodirbek Abdusattorov, and against a lot of other players. But okay, we have knight to c6, and we have pawn to e3. We have pawn to c4, now trying to take advantage of a3 being played, so you don't really have the option of undermining the c4 pawn with pawn to b3. For the moment you do, as the queen also guards it, but it can be a little bit tricky. Also, you weakened it, so knight a5, knight b3 could be an idea in the future. But now we have bishop captures on f6, queen captures, and pawn to g3. This is all theory, and you can see by the situation on the clocks that they're playing really fast. Sometimes one of the clocks will disappear as something is broken with the PGN. Maybe they didn't connect the clocks properly at the tournament or something, so for some reason it disappears from time to time. We have bishop to d6 and bishop to g2. Castles by both players, and now we have rook f to d8. Okay, so this is still known theory. You can see an hour and 28 minutes on the clock for one player, nothing for the other, but what can you do? And there are 2 moves that have been played here. One is b3 and the other one is pawn to h4, and this move has never been played. That is actually what I meant. b3 has been played, h4 has never been played, so it is now as of move 13 that we have a completely new game. And let's see how the game develops. We have pawn to h6 and pawn to b3, opening up the b file. We have knight to a5, now pressuring that b3 pawn, and knight to d2, adding another defender. We have bishop to f8, and now b captures on c4, d captures on c4. And you're probably wondering, at the beginning of the video, I said that this game is the story of the rook on a1, and it doesn't really look like the rook on a1 is doing anything up until this point. Rook to b1. Okay, so obviously you're putting some pressure on that b7 pawn. The knight is unable to move, so black decides to defend it. You can play pawn to b6 if you want, but here, first rook 8 to b8. And the pawn to b6, while the bishop on g2 isn't really that great, so you have to move the rook first. Rook to b5. Okay, a nice rook lift. The rook will be very dangerous here. The rook can come to e5 later on if needed. And now maybe you could have prevented this if you went knight to b3 and that defended the b7 pawn that way, but now the rook is already in the game. We have pawn to b6 and pawn to f4. Okay, we have queen to e7, trying to go after the rook on b5. pawn to a4, and now bishop to d7, putting pressure on the rook, and the rook to e5. Okay, attacking the queen, nothing spectacular happening. Queen to a3, saying that, okay, now the queen and the knight are tied to the defense of the a4 pawn, and they cannot move. But that's usually when something in chess goes really wrong, and you realize that they actually can move. So we have knight d to b1, attacking the queen. We have queen to b3, offering a queen trade, now saying, okay, now either we trade or I win the pawn. And we have queen to h5, offering the full pawn. And it's one of those positions where the best move is actually to capture the pawn, which is, if you've ever seen Stockfish play, Stockfish will have 5 pieces in front of its king, and it will capture a pawn on the other side, because Stockfish can calculate everything. Humans really can't. And the danger is something like f5. You bring the knight back into the game, you attack the rook, let's say rook e4 and pawn to f6, and this holds for black. Nothing wrong with that. But when humans play, it's a little bit different. After queen to h5, we have bishop to d6, attacking the rook, and here it comes. Now, what would you play here? That is the real question. And this is going to be the first of 3 pause the video moments. This one's going to be a short one. The next 2 will be the big ones. So there are 2 great ways to continue this game. One is bishop to d5, which was played in the game. The other one is bishop to e4, which is a little bit odd, as you're not really threatening anything. But what is black to do? There's really not all that much, and you're still gonna just rush through and open up the king side. And if you capture, then the f file opens up as well. That f7 pawn is hanging, and you cannot go bishop to e6, as d5 would just kick away the bishop. So bishop to e8 would have to be played, and then queen f5 with queen h7, and that's pretty much all there is to it. If g6, queen to f6, e6 coming, black's pieces are completely useless here. None of the pieces can help out with, for example, the advancement of the e-pawn. So it's a really weird placement of black's pieces, and it just works for white. In the game, bishop to d5 was played, putting pressure on f7 right away, and best would be to just capture on e5. It's just, you have to be cold-blooded like Stockfish sometimes and just capture it, open up this, or even allow bishop captures on f7. Queen captures doesn't really do all that much. King h8, f captures on e5, and it's not great for black, but, maybe you can defend. That e6 pawn is coming, d5, d6 is coming. Objectively, it's winning for white, but it's the best you have. So after bishop to d5, it wasn't played. Rook to f8 was played, just defending that pawn on f7, and it's a great move unless white finds an even greater one. And this is the moment. Feel free to pause the video and try to find the absolute best move for white while I give you a couple of seconds. Of course, rook to g5. So it went rook a1 to b1 to b5 to e5, attack the queen, and now rook to g5, putting pressure on g7, threatening queen captures on h6, and of course the rook cannot be captured. If you capture the rook, h captures, f captures, then comes, well, there's no move you can play. Whatever, this pawn is pinned, even just a nice g6, queen h7 will be checkmate. The only way you could maybe stall and prolong is bishop g4. You give up a piece for nothing, then maybe g6, but still just h5. You open up the position. This is completely winning. So it's not, the rook cannot be captured. It's like Steinitz versus von Barleben, where the story of the immortal rook. We have bishop to e7, attacking the rook on g5 now with the rook, and rook to g6. Again, the rook cannot be captured as the f-pawn is pinned. And what can you play here? Interestingly, if you play king h7 and just unpin, then you get hit with bishop captures on f7, rook captures, and rook captures on h6 with check, where the rook finally has to be captured, but then everything just falls. Queen captures, your king is wide in the open. The pieces are still useless. The bishop here is hanging. It's unplayable. So after rook to g6, rook b to e8 was played, hoping for maybe something to go wrong. But here it's actually a forced mate in 3. You can win this however you want, but it's actually a forced mate in 3. So what would you play here? Interestingly, Felix-Antonio didn't play this particular line because all of the lines are winning. But you guys, comfortable in your own homes, you can find it while I give you a couple of seconds. The move in question is queen to e5, a beautiful centralizing move. You cannot play pawn to f6, of course, this is pinned. The threat is queen captures on g7, and bishop to f6 does not work. You just capture it and checkmate on the next move. So it would get the job done immediately, but he went for rook captures on h6, which also gets the job done. There's just nothing you can do here. G captures on h6 was played, and now queen to g6 check. You have to be careful. Capturing on h6 will not get the job done. Queen to g6 check, king to h8, queen captures on h6 check, king to g8, and now the quickest way to win, I'm sure you see it because it's a very popular theme. Like I said, I can never pause you from stopping the video. You can do it if you want. The move is bishop to e4. Threatening queen to h7 checkmate, and the only way to prolong the agony is to play pawn to f5, but there's no real reason to do it. And he was in this position on move 30 that Josep-Antonio Lacasa Diaz resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Once you block it with pawn to f5, bishop to e6 check, and that is it. The king has no squares. You have to give up the bishop, then you have to give up the rook. Let's say queen to g6 check, king h8, bishop captures on f7. Now this will be checkmate, or if you stop that, then you block the rook, and then queen to g8 will be checkmate. So yeah, incredible game. After bishop to e4, black resigned. But yeah, what a journey that rook undertook, and it was really incredible. And once again, all thanks to David Lada for finding this game and sending it to us so we can also enjoy it. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you still haven't, first link in the description below. Join the Lotus Chess Arena today. It starts at 6:30 Central European Time. It's going to be a lot of fun, so do join. I would like to thank Michael Cox, Subramanian Kotapalli, Daniel Baggio, Priyadarshan Manohar, and William Gould for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.